All right. Well, hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Let's see here. One moment. I think we're having a few technical difficulties. There we are. All right. Can you hear me okay, Dr. Obioha?
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, today we are going to be talking about occupational health. Our topic today is workplace wellness, what employers and workers need to know. I am Dr. Vanessa Enoch with Vision Works Incorporated, and I am joined today with Dr. Chike Obioha from St. Richard's Clinic. So, Dr.
Yeah,
Obioha, how are you today?
I'm well. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in to listen to this program.
Well, I am so glad that you're well, and
Yeah,
hopefully, you're going to tell us all how we can all be well as well today.
yeah,
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Obioha, I want to delve right into our topic for today and ask you a few questions. But before we get into our questions, can you tell us a little bit about what it means when to say occupational health? What is
yeah.
occupational health all about?
It's actually the bane of preventive medicine today, in terms of it tries to keep you safe in your workplace. Everybody aspires to be at work. The current World Health Organization definition of health actually encompasses a commensurable work as part of health. In other words, if you're not working, you don't quite fit into that definition. If you're not working compensably, so work is the bane of the day, and I cannot overemphasize this. I've spoken about it in the previous conversations that the nature of the world we live today means that people are going to work longer than they used to in terms of their retirement age. The more and more people who are retired are coming back into the workforce. More people who are working, trying to retire, will have to extend the time that they work. So the workplace is kind of second place to home, if I put it that way. And we can't just overemphasize the importance of wellness in the workplace. The whole concept of occupational medicine is about having a healthy workforce so that we can actually benefit the workplace and vice versa. The workplace benefits us. We work better when we are healthy, and that's the focus of occupational medicine. It actually encompasses almost every aspect of medicine, but it brings it to the workplace more like. I think in a nutshell, that's the best way to just describe what occupational medicine does.
Okay, so what you're saying basically is that it overlaps is what I'm hearing with our general health care.
Maybe that's a way to look at it, but I think I'll put it ahead of our general healthcare. If you if you are healthy, then you can provide a service or work, and you can get compensated, and that way you better take care of yourself. That is the
Okay.
modification of the definition of health that encompasses the compensable work part of it. That's not just being healthy in terms of physical and mind health, but you have to be working or have a source of income, however you do it. But most times you have to work to generate some income, whatever the
Absolutely.
nature of work is. So the
Absolutely.
as you can just think as wide as you can. The person flying to the moon is going there is the workplace. The workplace is the person flying in the air is in the workplace flying. The people that work with them are in the workplace. The person who is in the physician's office is in the workplace. The person who is selling a restaurant, the person is kind of manning the little gas station or a little every single thing you do that puts you in an environment where you're trying to get some compensation is a work by definition. And if you're hired to do that work, you'll be better off at it if you're healthy, you know. So
Wonderful.
when you yeah, when you think about it, the work generates its own challenge. and then your health also generate. Let me just take the recent pandemic we had with the COVID. Most people were infected either in their commute to work or in their workplace. And the government had to step up with the kind of one of the most drastic public health measures in our lifetime by literally shutting down almost every aspect of activity just to keep us healthy and safe for the period of the pandemic, because most of these things they run their course, and once they can get out of there, yeah. But think of it that way. I was an essential duty provider during that period. So the government had me testing routinely, but I used to do tests for COVID on a weekly basis, and I had to show the report that, hey, you have not gotten it yet. And then I had to wear a mask. I had to do, personal protective equipment, we call it. I have to wear a mask. I have to wear a gown and try to shelter myself from picking up the virus in my workplace and kind of getting it to my home, where most of the rest of the family was forced to stay under the circumstance. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
and
So,
yeah,
so
that's kind
Dr.
of how it works. So
Okay.
the nature of my work, generated that, infectious type challenge. But there are a lot more challenges as we go through this conversation that come to the
Absolutely.
work. Mhm.
And so, Dr. Obioha, what kinds of services fall under the umbrella of occupational medicine?
So the occupation is the most collaborative, if you ask me, of medical specialties. First, we collaborate with a lot of non-medical providers. When I was in training, we had the ergonomists, people who kind of look at the work environment and try to look at how to make it more ergonomically suitable so that people don't injure themselves by lifting weights or whatever they do at work, the work. Then you have the um, industrial scientists, the people who come in and make assessments of exposures that you can have at work. People can be exposed to certain hazardous materials at work. In fact, to be more practical about it, I had a 4 week internship with the NIOSH, the NIOSH outfit of the CDC here in Cincinnati during my fellowship training in occupational medicine. I spent 4 weeks. And during that 4 weeks, we had to go out to. So the way it works is the law allows anyone who is working and is exposed, gets an illness that he feels is work related, to write to the CDC and say, hey, this is. And when the CDC pulls enough information from the workforce, they are forced to send their team out there to find out what's going on there. Ideally, that particular plant should have anticipated the exposure. It was a chemical plant. They used to manufacture some plastic material that's used to wrap some, if I remember, maybe beef type of material. And then it was somewhere in Illinois. So we went out there, and it turns out the factory has been there for God knows ages. And some of the chemical reactions that were going on was now beginning to generate toxic challenges to the workforce. And they had a myriad of complaints, from neurological to physical complaints. And we tried to look at it. We had economists, we had industrial uh, scientists with us who were able to pick up samples of air, samples of materials that we found at the workplace to make an
Do you
assessment,
have an open, non healing wound from surgical?
to figure out what was going on, whether you can actually tie the exposure to the complaints the individuals had. That's kind of the thing, and then kind of go through what the legal system allows to make sure that people are not harmed in their workplace. So yeah, it is the responsibility of the employer to ensure that there's safety in the workplace. If somebody is working for you, you shouldn't come there and get mugged. That's actually a work-related problem, or you're not generating some toxic fumes that can ultimately harm the person in their lifetime. So those are kind of, and then have some kind of either preventive measure or be able to make that assessment, determination, and compensation for it. That's kind of all that is in occupational. But it is a very broad field,
Sounds
from
like it.
anyhow you
Sounds
look at it.
so. Let me
most
ask
most
you
people end up just focusing on an area of it,
this.
like try to concentrate on maybe transportation, for instance, which has a lot of activities there, or agriculture or something. But it is a very broad specialty, if you ask me, at least from
Yeah,
my
sounds like
my
it's
knowledge and exposure. Yeah, it
very interesting.
really goes into almost any lifestyle that we do. I had the most interesting patient that I met. There was a lady who was working in a college campus, and she was a researcher. I was excited at her job. I started the job, and then she kept having this illness that just would not go away. She went from one position to the other. I just kept going. Nobody could figure out what the problem was until she saw an occupational physician. And for the first time, somebody actually thought that maybe the work is the problem. Because she said she moved from one lab to the other, moved to three different labs, and was convinced because she was moving from one lab to the other that had nothing to do with the work. It turns out, let me kind of end the whole long story. It turns out she was allergic to mice, which was what she was working with. So as she kept moving the mice from one place to the other, changing it,
Oh
she kept
wow,
having the same problem. So she needed,
wow.
yeah, that's kind of. So we needed somebody an allergenist came in there and made an assessment and said, hey, this person is allergic to mice. Do
Oh
we
wow.
either desensitize her or take her away from the mice so that she doesn't have the problem she's having? And that's just one example of how this is. So you find yourself collaborating with almost every aspect of medicine. Some like a physiatrist, for instance.
Let
Sorry,
me let
I
me
keep
ask you
talking too much.
a couple of, yeah. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So can you explain the role of pre-employment physicals, return to work evaluations, and injury management in promoting workplace safety? Where do
Well,
those things play a part?
all of them just kind of fall in place. You just want to kind of make sure you're healthy enough to start. There are some jobs that demand certain amount of physical exertion. So your pre-employment kind of tries to establish whether you can actually do the job. For instance, pre-employment for motor uh, truck drivers. Let me just use the truck drivers who travel either interstate or intrastate commutes. Yeah, you should be able to, as a driver, demonstrate certain physical capabilities to be able to do the job. If not, you won't be able to do the job. So the pre-employment is essential to even get a license to be able to do that commute. And
So,
then,
so
sorry,
Dr. Obioha, so I'm hearing you talk about truck drivers, for example.
yeah.
And that's a really interesting way that it sounds like a physician might interact with an employer. How would you or how do you work with employers to identify and reduce workplace hazards?
So the employers most times reach out to us and say, "Hey, let's take for instance, an employer is trying to get people to do work in a certain site where they are doing some construction, and then he reaches out to us and say, "Hey, this construction is going to go on for the next 2 months or so. He needs to kind of have an assessment of the staff and the exposures they have there." Some of them will be nailing down nails to kind of do the construction. There will be sound exposure there. So if you kind of make an assessment of how well they hear before they start the work, it gives a baseline of their hearing so that at the end of the work, if they're having hearing challenges, then you know that exposure may have been. Well, more importantly, it helps you figure out to make sure that they have appropriate what we call personal protective equipment. Something to muffle up the sound from hurting the ears. For that particular work exposure and kind of mitigate that problem being a challenge to the individual at the end of that contract period. That's just one example of it. There other exposures people have had in the past, like asbestos. I'm sure you've heard about the respiratory challenges that people who are exposed to asbestos have had. Some of them are even carcinogenic. So those are kind of things that in current times you can get compensated if the government had you do a job, maybe in the military or something that got you exposed to asbestos, and you're not dealing with some mesothelioma or some kind of cancer condition that maybe can be linked to that exposure. If we can, as an occupational medicine provider, I can provide a report that supports whatever claims you're making to support your. But more importantly, if you are going to a job that will expose you to asbestos, we would have a physical assessment to make sure that you're okay, good enough to do the work, and you have, make recommendations to make sure that your employer gives you the necessary protective materials to keep you from the exposure that would harm you in the long run. That's kind of how it goes. There are sometimes it gets very interesting. I'll tell you the experience I had right here when I was working at the Hamilton Hospital. Was a gentleman who had an exposure to some kind of heavy equipment that he was driving. And down the line, he was noted to have a lot of carbon monoxide in his circulation. So the challenge was quick to figure out. First, you get him a treatment. We had him in the oxygen treatment to get the the carbon monoxide out of his system. But the question was, where was the exposure? So when I took the detailed occupational history with him, I found out that his job was in the open space. That limited how much exposure he could have had to the carbon monoxide. And then they actually checked the equipment and found out the equipment was not generating a lot of carbon monoxide that is comparable to how much he had in his circulation. At the end of the day, I think the consensus was that he had an old truck that was his own personal automobile, and he spent a lot of time in the truck, and the truck was what was generating the carbon monoxide. But for a period of time, nobody could figure out where the source of the carbon monoxide was from. But like I said, that's kind of one of where the occupational knowledge and experience comes in to figure out, is this person, can he hold the workplace liable for his challenge, or is it something related to something else? Some people smoke and they can actually generate a lot of such. But in his particular case, it wasn't. But those are just simple examples of what the workplace challenge is. A very busy specialty, if you ask me. If you get doing the work, because everybody does some work.
Well, let
Nurses,
me
for instance, have low back pain from lifting stuff at workplace, and it's mandate is the hospital system should make available materials for them to lift heavy patients and materials so they don't suffer injuries as a consequence. And if they do, then they get the appropriate treatment for it, no compensation, be it as it may.
Okay, let me let's do this, Dr. Rubioha. I
Yeah.
want to take just a short commercial break and let
Okay.
everybody know before we go to commercial that
Okay.
I am Dr. Vanessa Enoch with Vision Works Incorporated, and I am here talking with Dr. Chike Obioha of St. Richard's Clinic, which is located in Mason, Ohio. And if you have an occupational health concern or any other health concern for that matter, you can call Dr. Obioha at 513-306-4910, or you can go to www.strichardsclinics with an S on the end.com. And let me just take a short break and play this commercial.
Bed sore, diabetes, or poor circulation, and you've been told to have your foot or leg amputated due to a bone infection? Don't you really deserve a second opinion? You may want a consultation with a doctor at St. Richard's Clinic on Socialville Foster Road in Mason, with decades of wound care experience. In addition to treating work-related injuries, St. Richard's Clinic also provides neighborly primary and urgent care services, with scheduled appointments, walk-ins, and telehealth visits. St. Richard's Clinic is currently accepting new patients and accepts most health insurance plans. St. Richard's Clinic is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and Saturday by appointment. Schedule with St. Richard's Clinic online or call 513-306-4910. That's 513-306-4910.
Well, welcome back, Dr. Obioha.
Thank you.
Well, we are here today talking about workplace wellness or occupational health, what employers and workers need to know. So, I am here interviewing Dr. Obioha about these very important matters, your workplace health and wellness. And so, I want to continue, Dr. Obioha, by asking you what are the most common workplace related health conditions that you see in your clinic?
Okay, so they actually, I've managed several clinics. I've had exposures in different ways. It kind of varies, with the environment. Like when I was in Iowa in my training, they there was a number of patient. The clinic was dedicated to firefighters, people in the armed forces, the the security environment. That was the bulk of the patients, and I had to move to another clinic where the bulk of the patients were people who had worked in the nuclear plant in Ames, Iowa, and some of them have been exposed to radioactive materials that then had worked in somewhere else where the exposure was from car batteries and stuff. So as you move from one clinic to the other, it tends to vary. Most occupational health clinics are mobile clinics. They are attached to one particular, job activity or the other. I had another clinic where it was a manufacturing of oatmeal that we had. So depending on what section the workers were working, if they were lifting materials in the packaging section, they tend to have more physical challenges. If they were exposed to the dust, they will have more respiratory challenges, and so on and so forth. So
Well,
it
let me
kind of
ask
varies.
you about a different. Let me ask you about a different kind of health concern. How does chronic stress and burnout show up in
Oh yeah.
occupational health,
So
and what can be done about that?
yeah, so most people in the physician world today, most in the medical, are challenged by long hours because of needing to do more documentation for compensation. The insurance companies want more documentation. And the physician, you see, the job of the physician doesn't change. He has to see the patient and figure out what's wrong with the patient and treat the patient. Now, if you now start adding things in their documentation, you may add more hours to them. So they have to sit down and make sure that documentation is done completely. Every now and then they call back and say, hey, you forgot to put this doc. So all that kind of adds to the amount of time they spend working, whether they're physically in the workplace or remotely working there, but they still work there. So that adds, emotional stress, it has physical stress, and those that leads to kind of some of the things that you just pointed out with exhaustion and all that. So the idea, the concept is to just find a way to decompress, limit the hours, for instance. There's been some national laws that have been passed to minimize how much time the residents who are in training to be physicians are allowed to put in just to minimize the burnout that most of them experience. At the end of the day, you find out that you do the work, but you don't get the benefits, and then there is actually a demerit to it in terms of your physical and mental health status. So all those kind of have to kind of line up for you to enjoy the work that you do.
So, Dr. Obioha, what role does mental health play in workplace wellness?
Yeah, it is just one of those big banner. Just let's take the COVID that just happened recently. You can imagine a scenario where people were not going to work. They were stuck at home, and it was a deviation from their routine. The routine was you wake up in the morning, the husband goes to work, the wife goes to what she does, and the kids go to school. Now the schools were shut down, most workplaces were shut down. People had to cohabit in a way that they were not doing before. And besides that, they had other limitations in being able to move around. So that created a whole psychological challenge. And then the scare that was in the media, for instance, about dying from getting the COVID and things like that. So that created a whole other dynamics that actually was overlooked during because the pandemic was focused at getting the virus and trying to save those who have it. And that, the whole public health sector was geared towards that. Hospitals were shut down so that people who had COVID could take up rooms. But people were having, psychological challenges that was not even considered as part of the problem. You can imagine suicide rate went up. And the COVID itself had its own basic. It was a vasculitis kind of virus. It kind of went after the blood vessels. So there was increased loss of limb from people who had it. People had stroke more than they used to. People who would have had an infection in the hand that would have been treated would end up losing the limb, from that. And that creates a whole different impairment and psychological challenge that was not even considered as a major problem during the pandemic. So those are kind of the aftermaths of that. And then most of the challenges from the COVID was contracted in the workplace or commute to the workplace. Most people who had the problem had to kind of reside at home to stay away from either spreading it or or getting a second infection from it. So yeah, that's a whole new workplace challenge that the country had, in fact, the world had to deal with at the time. So that's an example of a work related problem that can throw up
Let's
a challenge like
let's
that.
Yep, let's shift gears just for a second because we are also streaming on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So there are a lot of professionals who might be chiming in on LinkedIn,
Okay.
a lot of employers, for example. What should business owners and HR leaders know about integrating occupational health into their employee wellness plans?
Please, that is a very lovely topic. To keep yourself away from having to deal with a lot of, claims from work-related injury. Your best bet is to integrate a good, health system that helps to one prevent people from identify problem, potential candidates and keep them away from the work, or give them appropriate, protective equipment to keep them from having injuries from work. Even if they don't, at least make that injury minimal or eliminate it if it's possible. Like that, you have a stronger workforce. You have a more effective workforce. The workforce generates a better outcome if they are healthy and happy. And that's what the whole concept. But the government has done a lot, like work-related violence, for instance, and harassment. We actually have laws that kind of make sure that people who are in the workplace are educated about things that can make them liable to have a litigation on that front. How do you interact with your female colleagues at work to avoid scenarios that could be perceived as sexual harassment or you know or or gender intimidation and stuff like that. Yeah. So all those are real facets of the psychological components of problems that arise at work that actually has generated a national and legislative agenda to protect individuals at work, which is also a good thing.
So Dr. Obioha, how can investing in workplace wellness reduce absenteeism, improve productivity, and lower insurance costs?
Honestly, it's simpler to answer that question than to even discuss it. I mean, if you enjoy your workplace, you're more likely to go there. Just like a kid loves candy, wants to go to a candy shop. If you go to work and enjoy what you do there, the chances are that you're going to go there more frequently. And like I said, it encompasses you go there, you're healthy, you enjoy what you do, and you are well compensated for it. I mean, I don't think you can overemphasize the benefit of that. And as long as you're working and you're being productive at work, that is what generates revenue for the workplace. So it's a cycle that everybody merits if the person at work is happy. And that's why I think the whole legislative process was they deemed it necessary to legislate things that females perceive at work that make them feel like they're not welcome and have empowered them to be able to fight it if it exists in the work. And
Well,
I think this generation has a better work environment than probably their predecessors did. Because there was a time women were abused, and their complaints were neglected until there was a legislative power to it.
so what are some low cost or high impact wellness interventions that employers can implement right now?
Honestly, the lowest, I think, let's start with vaccination. It's almost a flu season here, and there's vaccinations available for flu. At least I have one in my office, and there are some places you can get it for free. So why not ensure that people, like, especially if you're working in an environment where you're going to be exposed to a lot of people, like in healthcare, for instance, people get vaccinated for flu, get a flu shot and keep yourself free from that. There are other things like COVID. We are anticipating a COVID bump as we move into the, the season where you expect that viruses to be all over the place. And if you're in the older age group, irrespective of what the media is talking about vaccinations, we know that we have proven records that these vaccinations actually do work, especially for those who need it. I think there's no dispute about that for the different populations of people who are more likely to be severely harmed by these infections, that they should get vaccination to protect themselves. That to me is the simplest, you know, um, simplest measure that you can put in to keep people from having flu and being absent from work as a consequence. Yeah.
Dr. Obioha, I think this question, which comes from the audience,
Okay.
I think it's probably driven by some current events in the media right now. This person wants to know if it's okay to take Tylenol.
That is, I don't know how to approach that without getting political. But I think the medical community has spoken about it. Yes, it's good to take Tylenol. Tylenol is something that's been with us for a long time. There's been the, kind of more political than medical push to make Tylenol look like it's the driver of autism. But if you are being fair to yourself, you realize that Tylenol has been here longer than autism became a challenge in the society. So I don't know how to make that get into that. I like to stick in the field where I am, which is the medical field, and I will encourage anyone who needs Tylenol to take it. At least at this point, if we have a consensus in the medical field about what the guidelines should be in terms of avoiding use of Tylenol, it will be available to physicians that see patients, and they will be able to. But if it's just coming as something like a political slogan, I'm not sure how to get into it. I just say, okay, listen to what the news has to say. But when you have a problem, see your physician and get the appropriate care.
All right.
I believe every physician will back me on that,
So
whether they are politicians or not.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about workers' rights and responsibilities.
Okay.
So, for employees, what should they expect from a responsible workplace when it comes to health and safety?
So the first is the employer should give you enough information in terms of your health exposure in the workplace. It's your right to have that. You should. Some of these things are legislated because, like when I was opening up my clinic, I was made to, go to the department and find out what is it that I need to display in the office for the safety of the staff and the patients that are coming. Those are things. I had the fire chief come and inspect my office recently and make sure that we have escape routes and diagrams to show people how to get out if there was fire situation and the fire extinguisher is working and all that. Those are little things that have been, kind of integrated into our whole societal existence to kind of guarantee that there's safety at work with respect to whatever that we are dealing with at work. That's kind of the bottom line. Then you as an employee should seek out information that empowers you. What are those empowering information? Those are your rights. Does somebody have the right to do this to you at work? How do you go about? Those are things that should be clear to you as you're starting the work, getting in the workforce. I was privileged to hire fresh graduates when I opened my clinic. They just got out of training and joined the clinic. And in that case, they have not had any experience in the work field. So I had to make an effort to make sure that there was a work book that they could use to navigate their experiences at work and know that this is safe, this is not safe, this is okay, this is not okay. And I believe every workplace has something like that, and it's in some states you have to actually get a lawyer to look through that material and actually, have a legal binding to it. So yeah, the society is done a lot to make sure that you are empowered. You have to empower yourself and get informed. That's what I'm saying.
So what protections are in place? And I don't know if you know this, but what protections are in place to ensure that workers aren't penalized for seeking medical attention or requesting accommodations?
Again, you have to empower yourself if you're getting into a workplace to know when you have a sick off, is it a paid leave or non-paid, and stuff like that. Those are things that should be clear as you're walking into a workplace to know for sure. I think for most full-time workers, they are more protected than the part-time workers with some of these legislatures, and you got to look at it from that perspective. Yeah. There's
Let-
been a long debate in this country about the pregnancy, women in pregnancy getting enough time, to their advantage and able to go through that, whether they should be paid or not. Well, at least they are allowed to have the time. The next thing is to see, to be able to, carry out activities like in, some other Western countries where people actually get compensated when they have to deal with pregnancy and pregnancy-related absenteeism from work. We're not there yet as a country in the United States. So, but hopefully at some point we'll get there.
Well, Dr. Obiaha, I want to take another break here for a second just to let the viewers know that I am Dr. Vanessa Enoch with Vision Works Inc. And I am interviewing Dr. Chike Obioha with St. Richard's Clinic. And St. Richard's Clinic is located in Mason, Ohio, that is in the greater Cincinnati area. And you can reach Dr. Obioha at 513-306-4910 or go to his website at strichardsclinics.com. That's clinics with an S on the end, strichardsclinics.com. And Dr. Obioha, if you don't mind, I'd like to just play a quick commercial. And one second.
Do you have an open, non-healing wound from surgical treatment, bed sore, diabetes, or poor circulation, and you've been told to have your foot or leg amputated due to a bone infection? Don't you really deserve a second opinion? You may want a consultation with a doctor at St. Richard's Clinic on Socialville Foster Road in Mason, with decades of wound care experience. In addition to treating work-related injuries, St. Richard's Clinic also provides neighborly primary and urgent care services, with scheduled appointments, walk-ins, and telehealth visits. St. Richard's Clinic is currently accepting new patients and accepts most health insurance plans. St. Richard's Clinic is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and Saturday by appointment. Schedule with St. Richard's Clinic online or call 513-306-4910. That's 513-306-4910.
Well, hello again. I am back with Dr. Chike Obioha of St. Richard's Clinic. And Dr. Obioha, let's get into some discussion about industry specific issues. And I know you've spoken a little bit about this. So if it's just ditto, we can keep moving. But are there differences in occupational health risks based on industry, say between manufacturing and office work or healthcare?
Oh, definitely. There are differences with respect to skill sets. There are differences with respect to the nature of work, the amount of time put in for work. One of my most recent patients was a gentleman who drives the forklift for the DHL. DHL is, I believe, a shipping company, I believe. and he works at the airport. And when I interviewed, so he's had a challenge with his blood pressure control. This is now his primary care. He has his own primary care physician, but the primary care physician has had him on two or three blood pressure medications and is not able to get it under control. In addition, he's gaining a lot of weight. He has sleep apnea. He's just tumbling down with problems. After we had aired the edition on Black Men Health, he called the clinic and came in, and I saw him. And when I interviewed him, I realized his problem may be more occupational related than just the primary care. Now he does 6 days in a week driving the forklift 12 hours in the night. So his circadian rhythm is kind of become dismantled because of the nature of his work. He stays awake from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When others are sleeping, and then tries to sleep when others are awake. In fact, his primary care provider, who I lauded, quite, I gave a lot of kudos to for what she had done on her own as a primary care provider to help this gentleman try to develop an environment at home where he could kind of try to recreate that circadian rhythm by making sure that the blinds are completely out and try to create a darkness kind of thing. But anyhow you look at it, that is a physiological challenge for this individual. And then he wasn't exercising. He felt, okay, his knowledge of stuff was a little bit of challenging. He needed to figure out how to actually use his blood pressure monitor effectively. I brought the equipment in my office and showed him how to do it, and kind of elaborated to him how his work environment is creating a problem for him. Now, he didn't have any pets, he didn't have any real social life, but we delved into that to try and improve on that. He wasn't having any like physical exercise to offload the pressure he puts on himself. So those are things I went through his occupational history, taking it down to his personal primary care. But at least I like the fact that he was committed to the process, to engage in figuring out how can he make the best of opportunities he has to exercise, for instance. He felt the only exercise he could count to was walking from his parking lot to his workplace in the evening, which he felt was like a 10-minute walk. And I'm like, I wouldn't particularly call that exercise because he's actually going to work. you know, Exercise is something you do with a little bit of relaxation to it, not when you're walking down to a path towards work and you call that enough exercise. So we went through that, and then we'll see, as we saw him on follow up, and we'll continue to see him until we see if we can be able to achieve some of the things that I went into it just to point out the physicality aspect of work. Now, I have talked a little bit about those in the medical field who are doing more work just to make sure documentations and all that, and they have to have the volume to keep up practice. So there is more and more increase. In fact, the world has changed if you think about it. The average family, maybe several years back, you just have only one of the parents working and the other one took care of the kids. That person working is able to generate enough funds to take care of the family. Today is not the case. You have both parents are working and still are not able to keep up, keep up with the challenges in the home. So there is an increasing demand to work more in order to make an earnings or to make the bottom line. That's the truth about the society we live today. Until we get to the point where that is changed, that's just the reality, and that comes with emotional stress, physical exhaustion, more pronounced psychiatric manifestations, and then physical illnesses that people have to deal with just to be able to keep up with their bottom line.
Got it. So Dr. Obio, how do you tailor workplace wellness strategies for jobs that involve physical labor versus more sedentary desk task or desk
So,
roles?
so the different workplaces have the way I put it is workplaces know what the challenge is to their human resources department. They seek out necessary health policies, necessary health practices that kind of keep the workplace in tune with the law of the land, if I put it especially in most of the states. I think every state has laws now that guide how employers are, are allowed to treat their employees. With respect to the health. Where we come in is just to make sure the assessments and the documentations kind of line up. And then if there are any injuries that arise as a consequence, then it is adequately dealt with, depending on what health challenge there is there. Like I run also a wound care clinic, so people who have open wounds and injuries from work, I try to get them healed quickly and get them back to work. If they are not going back to work, at least I get them healed and back to whatever they choose to do if they are retired.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
just one aspect of one of the things I do, besides being an expert in occupational health and occupational medical practice. Yeah.
So, so just a few closing thoughts, Dr. Rubio.
Okay.
What's the biggest misconception you encounter about workplace wellness or occupational medicine?
Yeah, that was one question I actually pondered about when when asked to talk about the misconception. There is so much enlightenment today that the people who seek knowledge know what. Yeah, but I have to be honest with you. The political environment has become a little bit uh, disingenuous with and encroaching into things I don't think should be political, just like the Tylenol issue that we talked about. I don't know why that came about. I don't know why it became necessary for that to become a political issue and challenge people with that kind of misconception, the way I perceive it. If there was supposed to be something like that, usually the health society would have done quite some researches. The researchers will try to generate enough data to even try to make a claim like that. I wouldn't think it will be something that will just be in the news because somebody felt necessary to make it a news. So yeah, those are kind of the the new world we live in. Today you just turn the internet on and somebody just makes a proclamation or something about health, and people will take it and run away. And it becomes more viral before even somebody wishes to ask the physician. They say, hey, is there some truth to that? And now it's gone beyond the internet. It's now in the political and the media flame. So it becomes very difficult to kind of curb such ideas and knowledge. It's really a tough spot where people sit down and they are getting information that is literally wrong, if you ask me. And they have to confront somebody who actually knows what he's talking about to be able to figure it out. Not everybody has access or even the knowledge to know to seek that clarification. So
What about this
yeah,
movement, this anti-vaccine movement?
yeah.
What do you think about
I,
that?
I'm trying to stay away from. You know, it's almost like we are going through a, a reverse civilization. I think I'm going to comment like that. We've gotten so civilized that we just want to go back to where we started or something like that. I mean, we had over the years built-in concrete public health measures that got us to where we are. All of a sudden, we're trying to dismantle those things and see if we can go back here. So yeah, you're getting more illnesses that we thought we had conquered, just jumping out of the, and some variants may show up and now challenge us again in a way that we shouldn't. And those things cost man hours, cost people work. Some people get physically, permanently harmed. Just imagine if there was polio to deal with. I
Oh,
mean, they,
it's
we,
back.
we,
It's coming back, Dr. Rubio.
I mean, we had a president who was paralyzed from polio, and then we thought we had gone past that, and all of a sudden we are gonna have to deal with another generation that will have to deal with polio. If you were there when polio was a problem, you would know where I'm coming from. People had to be on these respiratory devices that had to come up there to just keep themselves alive by getting some breathing through the iron lung. I mean, how can we go past that and then all of a sudden We're in 2025 where we have all the knowledge, we have all the resources to us, we have everything at our beck and call. We have enough, much bigger workforce, much bigger manpower to provide help. And we're going back to measles and things that we have. It, I don't know how to get into it. I know it's more political, but from the medical point of view, it is almost outrageous. I mean, a child born in 2025 should be better than their parent or grandparent in their 90s. They shouldn't go through what they went through. But
So
that's just
what's
my
one
opinion.
absolutely what's one simple thing that every employer and every worker can do this week to prioritize health on the job?
I would say go get a flu shot, especially where it's free. If you work in any environment where you're coming across a lot of people, be it in a mall that you work, you work in a hospital setting, you're going to be flying in the airplane or whatever you do that will expose you to a lot of people during this. We're expecting a very cold season and a season with a lot of respiratory viruses out there. We already conquered some, but we've not completely gotten away from it. So why not protect yourself from it?
All
Wear a
right.
mask, for instance. Get a flu shot. Do something that keeps you safe so that we can go through this season and still look the way we are looking at this point.
All right.
That's
So
my
Dr.
little simple
Obio,
message. Mhm.
how can people connect with you or St. Richard's Clinic to learn more about occupational medicine
Well,
services?
our number is displayed in this encounter that we've had today, and then our website is also displayed. Any of those things will get you to me, and then we should be able to take it from there.
And I'm going to go ahead and tell people what that says, because as I'm looking at the phone number and the website streaming at the bottom of the screen, it is very tiny on your screen, I realize. So
Probably, yeah.
the phone number is 513-306-4910. You can reach St. Richard's Clinic at 513-306-4910.
Okay.
Dr. Obioha is located in the Mason, Ohio office, which is in the greater Cincinnati area. So if you live anywhere eh, in Mason, near Mason, or somewhere around the greater Cincinnati area, Dr. Obioha, are you accepting new patients?
Yes, I am accepting new patients at this point. Please just do not hesitate to give us a call and come in and be a part of this clinic for family, please. Mhm.
Or you can find Dr. Obioha in St. Richard's Clinic at www.strichardsclinics with an S on the end.com. strichardsclinics.com.
Okay.
Dr. Obioha, I want to thank you for being with us this evening, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime soon on our
Okay.
next topic. I'm not sure what that is right now, but
Okay.
we will definitely be posting to let you know when we'll be having another conversation. So thank you again. And
All right.
everyone, I bid you good evening and have a great evening. And thank you so much, Dr. Obioha. All
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine, Dr. Vanessa. Yeah.
right. Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah.